This is the 737 MAX 10, the biggest 737 variant Boeing has ever built. It's longer, carries more passengers, and is supposed to allow Boeing to claw back some ground from Airbus. But there are a few issues. The MAX 10 hasn't yet finished certification testing, and it might be doomed before it even enters commercial service. Before we get into the MAX 10's issues and how Boeing might go about rectifying them, let's take a look at the actual aircraft and see how it sticks against the competition. The Airbus A321neo and A321XLR. It isn't difficult to see that the MAX 10 is literally a stretch job. Boeing added 2 extra seat rows on top of the MAX 9, bringing the total length to 44 meters. For comparison, the shortest 787 variant is only 13 meters longer. The MAX 10 can seat 230 passengers in a high-density configuration, meaning it is the closest jet in Boeing's lineup to replace the 757. But even at that, it lacks the range, clocking in at just 3,100 nautical miles. And even though it uses the updated and efficient LEAP 1B engines which are found on the MAX 8 and 9, the airframe itself isn't a clean sheet design. In fact, the 737 platform is 60 years old. Enough is enough. Boeing can't just keep an aging design going forever. However, they have got creative with the MAX 10. The 737 is naturally very low to the ground, and because the fuselage is so long, the MAX 10 features special telescoping landing gear to prevent tail strikes during takeoff rotation. Okay, so we've seen the key features about the MAX 10, but why exactly did Boeing decide to build it in the first place? Well, as I briefly touched on earlier, the MAX 10 is the closest Boeing replacement to the 757. And because the idea of a re-engined 757 was thrown out the window, Boeing instead decided to refurbish the 737. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, and they desperately needed something to fill the gap that the 757 left behind. But the main reason? Competition. You see, when Airbus brought in the A321neo, Boeing needed a bigger airplane to stay competitive, but they didn't have time or budget for a clean sheet design, and their only option was to stretch the 737 one more time. But then things went to shit. 2 737 MAXs crashed in the space of 5 months, killing 346 people, and the entire global fleet was grounded. Boeing eventually fixed the MCAS issue, the root cause behind both accidents. But the reputation was very much damaged, and the trust in the 737 MAX was no more, leading to nearly $60 billion lost in cancelled orders. To add insult to injury, US Congress passed the Aircraft Certification Safety and Accountability Act. In short, this meant that new aircraft, which would include the MAX 7 and MAX 10, which suffered from delayed certification, must have modernized flight alert systems. But the MAX 10 doesn't have any. And this may come as a surprise, because by now cockpit commonality is a necessity in new aircraft for pilots to transition between airplanes seamlessly. But following the MAX crashes, the FAA requires the MAX 7 and 10 to have a means for pilots to silence the stick shaker and have a synthetic angle of attack sensor. Developing and incorporating these additional new features and their associated softwares have caused the delays, and in addition to specific requirements, there has been increased scrutiny from the FAA on Boeing's production processes. Separate problems have also emerged with the engine de-icing system, which can cause the engine inlet cowl to overheat in dry air for prolonged periods of time, potentially leading to structural damage. Boeing claims to have found a fix, but it does involve the rewiring of electrics and installing some diodes. But as of July 2025, the solution is still being approved by the FAA, and we don't even have a date yet for when the MAX 10 might be approved for commercial service. So if the MAX 10 isn't even certified yet, why would any airline want it? Especially as the A321neo is slightly more fuel efficient, has higher range, can carry more passengers, and is already available. Well, some airlines do want it, and its order book proves it, with Ryanair placing 150 firm orders and 150 additional options. Delta and United have each placed orders for over 100 aircraft. Turkish low-cost carrier Pegasus Airlines has ordered up to 200, along with others bringing the order book to over 1,200 firm orders. So then it's obvious airlines do want the MAX 10. But why? Well, the MAX 10 has an ace up its sleeve. It boasts the lowest cost per seat mile of not only the MAX family, but any other single-aisle aircraft on short to medium-haul routes. This means that on paper, the MAX 10 is the cheapest to operate per passenger, thanks to its larger capacity and fuel burn around the same as the MAX 9. The next reason the MAX 10 is so desirable is fleet commonality. This is when an airline operates multiple aircraft that share similar parts, cockpits, systems, or training requirements. This allows airlines to save money on major expenses such as pilot training and simulator time, in addition to maintenance, repairs, and inventory. Because the 737 has been such a smash hit throughout the years, many airlines have invested heavily in it, especially Ryanair, Europe's largest international airline, which uses an all 737 fleet due to its extreme short-haul efficiency. However, competition from Airbus is stiff, and the fact of the matter is, Airbus is very noticeably pulling ahead, and for every month the MAX 10 is held up by certification issues, Airbus is churning out 50 A320 family aircraft per month, with that number expected to increase to 75 per month in the coming years. So how does Boeing actually go about fixing the issues with the MAX 10? Obviously, certification is out of their control, but there are a few steps they could take to fulfill the MAX 10's potential. A short-term solution to save the MAX 10 is if Boeing offered larger discounts targeted at big 737 operators. In other words, ensuring previous customers return for more, rather than going for the competition. You see, if you or I wanted to buy a singular aircraft from Boeing or Airbus, we would pay full list price. But when loyal customers are looking to buy new aircraft to renew their fleets, then it's a good idea to buy in bulk. This allows room for negotiation for big discounts on a large order, and can potentially save billions of dollars for an airline. If Boeing were able to offer more extreme discounts to US carriers who operate the 737 extensively, such as Southwest Airlines, Delta, or United, then they could be able to undercut Airbus, especially because US carriers prefer ultra low cost per seat on short-haul, high-frequency routes. So, by offering more incentive for airlines to buy the jet, Boeing is essentially doubling down on where the MAX 10 really excels. It doesn't need to fly to Iceland, it just needs to fly from Los Angeles to Chicago cheaper than anything else. For a long-term solution, how about making a long-range MAX 10 variant? When Airbus built the A321XLR, they managed to increase the range through an additional rear center fuel tank, giving an extra 700 nautical miles of range. So to increase the range of the MAX 10, Boeing could install 1 or 2 additional center tanks in the cargo hold to increase fuel volume at a cost of some cargo space. And I don't know the specifics, but that could probably give the MAX 10 an extra 600 miles or so of range. But it's easier said than done, and there would be a few drawbacks. Of course, there'd be restricted cargo space, and in order to preserve payload capacity, the MTOW, or maximum takeoff weight, would need to be increased. And to do this, the wing box, center fuselage, and landing gear would need strengthening. The disadvantages of this would be extra weight, which could make the MAX 10 less efficient. And of course, the additional cost and extra certification time would mean the long-range variant may not be available for a while. But let's change tack for a bit. Who says the MAX 10 needs to just fly passengers? After all, the air cargo market is increasing rapidly, and forecasts suggest it could double by 2043. Boeing predicts there will be nearly 3,000 new and converted freighters needed globally, 1,300 of which would be narrow bodies. At the minute, the A321 freighter is dominating the narrow body freighter market, but a MAX 10 freighter would not only compete with the Airbus, but it would actually beat it, especially as the MAX 10 has more fuselage space, giving more payload tonnage and more efficiency. The challenges would be huge, and at the minute, this is just pure speculation, but it would allow Boeing to capture and hold the next generation freighter market, which at the minute it is currently losing to Airbus. But for now, Boeing should definitely focus on getting the MAX 10 certified for passenger use first. So then, is the MAX 10 doomed? Well, on paper, no. Delta, United and Ryanair are confident in the jet, and with an already healthy order book, almost 4 times as many as the MAX 7, I wouldn't be surprised if Boeing decided to take a risk on making a long-range variant or a freighter after the passenger variant enters service though. But having economics unrivaled by any other narrowbody, the MAX 10 is positioned nicely to not only directly compete with the A321neo, but instead to conquer its own niche of short-haul, high-density routes on home turf. So what do you think? Please take a moment to leave a comment with your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, then here are some more you might like. Alright then, I'll see you soon.